Good morning. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. My name is Elise Spencer. I am your host this morning. We're so glad that you've joined us on this Sunday morning as you're preparing for church or preparing for perhaps a day in the yard with these cool fall temperatures. It's a great time to get outside. Nonetheless, we're glad that you're with us this morning. We are joined in the studio this morning by Melora Jackson. Melora is the training and program specialist for the southern half of Mississippi's Division of Alzheimer's Disease and Other Dementia under the Department of Mental Health. Melora has a BA in psychology from Whitworth College in Spokane, Washington, and she holds a Master's of Science in Human Development and Family Studies with a gerontology emphasis from Colorado State University. Additionally, she is a certified mental health therapist. Prior to moving to Mississippi, Ms. Jackson was the Director of Senior Services and Director of Community Services for a nonprofit agency in Portland, Oregon called Friendly House. She has 21 years' experience working with vulnerable populations, older adults, and persons with dementia. Melora has authored numerous articles and presented on many aging and dementia topics, as well as many other topics and issues throughout her career. She has served as the president of the former South Mississippi Alzheimer's Association, then the Alzheimer's Foundation of the South, and as a member of the governing board of North Shore Psychiatric Hospital in Slidell. She also serves as an advisory council member to the Southern Mississippi Area Agency on Aging. Melora, welcome to the program, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So we're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and of course there's a lot of information in the media today about those conditions, but tell me first of all the distinction between dementia and Alzheimer's. Sometimes we tend to use those subjects interchangeably, and I feel that that's probably not proper.
Yeah, I think a lot of people misunderstand the difference. Dementia is an umbrella term. It's a syndrome that means basically the loss of intellectual functioning due to the death of brain cells. And there's different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's disease is the most common type. It's by far the most common. It accounts for about 70% of cases of dementia. So Alzheimer's is one type of dementia, but dementia is sort of the umbrella term or syndrome.
Okay. How many persons are affected by dementia?
Well, right now in America, we have about, Alzheimer's disease specifically, we have about 5.4 million people with Alzheimer's disease. When you add in other types of dementia, that number jumps somewhere to around 10 to 11 million. We don't know the exact numbers because there's so many other smaller, rarer types. In Mississippi, we know we have 53,000 plus people with Alzheimer's disease. Probably another couple thousand with other types of dementia.
And certainly when you count in the family members and caregivers, we're talking about a tremendous number of people whose lives are seriously impacted by this disease.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's probably 3 or 4 people per person with Alzheimer's disease or dementia that are involved in the care either directly or indirectly. So that number, adds up very quickly. You've got 25 million people affected, just with Alzheimer's alone, just by that.
That's really incredible.
Yeah.
We know that the course of the illness can tend to be fairly long and very difficult on those who are suffering and those that care for and love them. Mm-hmm. What are some of the presenting symptoms that would lead to a diagnosis of dementia?
Well, there's several. Some of the more obvious ones that we don't pick up on it right away because it starts so slowly. But after a while, people around them will begin to notice these symptoms. Things like, of course, losing things, misplacing things. Now, we all do that to some extent, mm-hmm. but when this is happening chronically, where it didn't before, that's an issue. Getting lost in familiar places. If someone goes to the grocery store, say, once a week for years, and then when one time they go, they can't find their way home, that's a very common mm-hmm. occurrence. Not being able to work appliances or do more complex tasks that they used to be able to do, maybe difficulty managing the finances and things like that, or working machines or a hobby, or leaving ingredients out of recipes. And okay. We're not talking just isolated incidents.
Sure.
Everybody will have these things happen once in a while, but when you have these things happening on a fairly regular basis, those are early warning signs.
Okay. Might you see a change in a person's appearance? Is there a difference in their self-care?
Not initially.
Okay.
They may look just fine. They may be able to take care of their personal care needs, and you wouldn't see any external signs of it. It's not until the person is well advanced in the disease that their grooming is going to start slipping. But in the early stages, usually the person is just fine externally and can often fool people around them into thinking everything's okay.
Okay. So there may be some behaviors that are designed to kind of mask forgetfulness.
A lot of times in conversations, people will forget a word, and so they'll use a different word, or they'll start to describe things a lot and sort of talk around subjects, trying to kind of hide it from other people, because it's a very scary thing to have happening to oneself. But I think there's also a lot of shame still associated with it, so people try to mask those symptoms when they can.
Okay. When an individual goes in to see a physician and some of these indicators are present, what would be a typical course of evaluation with a physician? What do they do to make the determination?
Usually they start out with some basic things like a basic getting a social history, making sure that behaviors and language and all are put into a context of that person's life. And then a basic physical exam and some blood work, of course. Typically, healthcare providers will do what we call a memory exam of some type. The most common one is called the mini mental status exam, and it's just a simple 5-minute set of questions and tasks they have a person do to see how they do in different areas of brain function. This is something that I typically do at health fairs and things like that as well. It doesn't diagnose it, but it flags if there might be problems in some areas. If a person doesn't score well on this one of these memory exams, then they'll go on to do more in-depth tests. They may do some neurological testing. They may go on to do brain scans and things like that if they find more of a problem. But Alzheimer's disease and most other types of dementia can only be diagnosed by autopsy, so we don't obviously do that on living people. So we have to rule out everything else that could be wrong. So the doctors will eliminate other things that might be problems, and eventually they can usually fairly accurately pinpoint the dementia.
So it is a process of exclusion.
Yes.
That can be a little bit frustrating, I'm sure, for patients and families.
Yeah.
Okay. When the determination is made that it is probable that an individual is in the early stages of dementia, what would be the course of treatment or the suggestions given to a patient and family to try to maximize a person's functioning?
Well, first of all, the earlier a person gets a diagnosis, the better.
Okay.
Because the sooner we catch the symptoms, the more we can do for that individual and the family. But I would suggest that, first of all, that unless the person is fairly far advanced, in which case it's probably pretty obvious, but if they're not real far advanced, that you work with the patient who has the disorder. They need to be aware of what's going on and proactive in their own care. And I think a lot of times we try to hide it from that individual. We need to let them know, because there's things that they need to work through, just like they would with any other disease, and come to terms with. They can also, there's lots of things that we know now we can do to help maintain our functioning, even if we have Alzheimer's or some type of dementia.
What are those types
well,
of things?
Continuing to engage your brain, which is something we want to do to try to help prevent it if we can. But things like watching our nutrition, if we eat well, get our water in, and those kinds of things, those can also help reduce the symptoms. The other big piece is to get a person on medication. There are 4 different medications for Alzheimer's disease, and one of them is typically paired with one of the other 3. The sooner we get that person on those medications, the slower the rate of progression of this illness. So they'll be able to function at a higher level for much longer than they would otherwise. So it benefits them in that way as well.
So these medications aren't designed to reverse?
No, they won't reverse it.
Okay.
Now, initially, a person may seem to improve for a few months and regain a little bit of function. But over time, they're still going to deteriorate, but at a much slower rate. And so we want to slow that process down and give a person as much quality time to make decisions for themselves, to be able to take care of themselves and be as independent as possible. And that makes it easier on the family as well.
Okay. When a person is in the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's, as a caregiver, you have to think about a person's safety.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Are there suggestions that you would make to a family member, just in terms of, for a person that's still maintaining a fair amount of independence, you still want to make sure that they don't, start a fire on the stove and things like that. Those are concerns.
Yeah.
What are suggestions you give to caregivers for that?
If the person is open to talking about it, if the individual with the disease is open to talking about it, solicit their help in making some of those safety changes. If they're not, you may have to be a little bit sneaky about it, and that's okay. But things like disabling the stove, getting home-delivered meals, or having someone to bring in the meals or cook for them so they don't have to, keeping locks on the doors, where doors that you don't want the person to go out and wander through, and be unsafe. I think one of the biggest things, though, of course, is driving.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge for caregivers, because that's we identify a lot with our independence, and when you start to lose that, that's very difficult. So getting the car keys away is very important. And if you can get that person to be willing to give up the car keys, all the better. That's nice, but it doesn't always happen. It is. That's one of the hardest things for caregivers. But really, as soon as a person is diagnosed, they need to stop driving before they're really losing abilities, because their reflexes are not as good, and they're just getting lost. Even if they seem fine, things can happen, and we don't want to take that chance.
Well, I can imagine that driving can be, we can get into some pretty challenging situations, and for someone that has some degree of impairment through disease, that could very quickly become an overwhelming and terribly frightening experience, if not a tragic one.
Yeah,
okay.
Very much so.
So in terms of, if we back up a little bit here, prior to coming to a point where you have some cognitive impairment, some difficulty, in terms of the younger folks that we have in our community, there are things that we can do to try to preserve our good health.
Absolutely.
And that the basis is in adequate nutrition and sleep, and the types of recommendations that keep us healthy from other potential diseases.
Definitely good nutrition, things like the things you would do to stay heart healthy and prevent cancer and manage diabetes. A leaner diet, of course. Things like omega-3 fatty acids are very helpful for brain function. You're getting antioxidants, things like blueberries. The rule of the more colorful a vegetable or fruit is, the better it is for you. So you want to have plenty of those in your diet. Making sure you get enough fluid every day. That's, they say that 8 ounces, 8-ounce cups of water. It can be milk, juice. Try to limit the caffeine, of course, and sugar. Although there is evidence that there's something in coffee that is good, that helps prevent Alzheimer's. It's not the caffeine, so it can be decaf.
Well, that's very encouraging for some of
us. You can get your couple cups of coffee, and although don't drink coffee all day, or you're going to leach the calcium out of your bones and have other issues. But a little bit of coffee is okay. Is actually good. So things like that, engaging your brain, getting your exercise. If you exercise regularly, and it doesn't have to be real rigorous, but do something.
Okay.
Not only is that good for your heart and your body, but it actually releases a chemical in the brain called BDNF, and that actually does help improve cognitive function and build up resistance to Alzheimer's disease.
Very good. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. We'll be back after this short break. And we're back. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. I am your host, Elise Spencer. Canon Hospice is located at 1520 Broad Avenue in Gulfport, just north of Memorial Hospital. We offer home hospice and inpatient hospice services within a 50-mile radius of our location in Gulfport. We have a team of caring, professional, and compassionate caregivers that are eager to provide information relating to hospice services or any concern that relates to critical illness. Please give us a call if we can help you in any way. The number is 228-575-6251. Prior to the break, we were speaking with Melora Jackson. Melora was giving us some information about some of the preventative steps to try to safeguard ourselves from dementia and Alzheimer's disease. We've talked a little bit about some of the presenting symptoms, but there is such a thing as early onset, and I'm interested in knowing more about that.
Okay. Well, most cases of Alzheimer's occur in people who are over the age of 65. It is an age-related disorder, just as some disorders, diseases occur in childhood or midlife. Alzheimer's disease is associated with late life. However, more and more people are being diagnosed with what we call early onset Alzheimer's, a specific type that occurs typically in people who are in their 50s, sometimes even in their 40s. And that's becoming more and more common because we have more and more baby boomers, getting older. We've got more folks in these categories, so the disease numbers are rising in all these age categories, but particularly in the early onset. So right now we know of about 200,000 people in America who have early onset, who are between age 40 and 60 who have Alzheimer's disease, which doesn't sound like nearly as much, but we're just beginning to get to the skills to diagnose it at an earlier stage. So it's particularly problematic when you've got somebody who's maybe still raising a family, maybe they still have young children or
Sure.
middle-aged children, teenage children or whatever, who is looking forward to retiring someday, and now all of a sudden they have Alzheimer's disease and their whole world changes. So that can be a real problem.
Okay. So we've talked some about the presenting symptoms, but what actually happens to the human brain that causes? Do we know that?
Yeah. We don't know exactly what causes it. There's a lot of different genes that we know can cause Alzheimer's disease. We don't know exactly what the mechanism to start the process is, though, although there's certainly research and different theories about it. But we do know what happens to the brain. To keep it in simple terms, basically we develop, we have amyloid proteins that are sort of like proteins gone bad. They get clipped at the wrong place in the brain in the normal process of things, and they become toxic, and they basically smother the brain cells and kill them. Inside this brain cells, we have what we call neurofibrillary tangles. So if you ever hear someone talking about plaques and tangles, that's what they're talking about with Alzheimer's disease. But basically, in essence, what it does is it rots the brain cells and kills them. So over the course of the disease process, brain tissue is lost. So when people act in bizarre ways, or can't remember things, it's because the brain cells are not there to tell them what to do or how to behave or whatever. So they can't help their behaviors, but it's simply the brain is dying. And over time, Alzheimer's disease will kill that individual if they don't pass away from something else first. But because it's such a long and drawn-out illness, people will often pass away from something else before the disease runs its course, which can be 10 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very slow-moving illness, but it's basically a physical illness that kills brain cells.
So not only does it change a person's ability to remember their cognitive functioning, but it's got impacts on their personality as well, I imagine.
Yeah, and it's very important to remember. This is one thing I always tell caregivers, loved ones, family members, anybody who's taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's disease is it is a physical illness of the brain. And while their personality may change radically because of this illness, it is important to remember that it is not a disease of the soul or the spirit or their personality. It's not who they are. So when they behave badly, we need to remember it's the disease behaving badly, not that person.
Okay.
Definitely.
Agitation is one of the personality changes.
Very common symptom. When you're confused about where you are, you don't recognize things or people around you, you don't understand what they're saying. It's a very scary world to be in, should be a person with Alzheimer's. And I think agitation comes out of that fear. And you don't have the coping skills that you would have had before the disease process either. So it's easy to get agitated. Yeah.
With interactions with an individual suffering from this illness, would you encourage family members to spend as much time as they could just socializing and being together?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Maximize the time you have with that individual, especially at the beginning of the disease, where you can get the most out of that relationship. But even as the disease process works its way along, that person is still an adult, still a human being that needs attention and love and support. And even if their functioning is limited, what gets through still gets through. So it's very important that they have that interaction.
Continue to make the
Absolutely.
effort. Okay. What part of a person's memory is impacted in Alzheimer's disease?
Well, all types of memory are impacted, but the way the disease process works, we have a short-term memory and a long-term memory. And first we lose our short-term memory with this disease. That goes out the window right away. So I'll often hear family members say, well, Dad's driving me crazy. He can tell me all about things that happened in his childhood in great detail, but he can't remember what he had for lunch, an hour ago. And that's normal. That's normal for this disease. So they lose the short-term memory first, then they lose the long-term memory in the opposite order they gained it. So what we learn earliest, we learn the best. We have that memory the longest. So we sort of move backwards in time.
Okay.
So somebody who's 80 years old, in their mind's eye, they may be 40 because they've lost all the memories before that age. By the time they're 82, they may think they're 25.
Okay.
So they're moving backwards. So the most recent stuff goes first.
Okay. And talking about some of those experiences in early lifetime can be probably fairly reassuring to that person if they can speak about something they remember from childhood or early adulthood.
It's very reassuring. It's therapeutic. It's very helpful. So if somebody is agitated or worried or saying, I want to go home over and over and over, they may have been living in the same house for 40 years, but they're talking about wherever home was when they were whatever age they feel like they're at. So if you can distract people from a lot of distress and difficult behaviors, often by reminiscing about, well, tell me, what was your favorite game when you were a child, or what was your, best, favorite songs, or things like that. Different things you can reminisce about with them when they were young. That will often soothe them and, create some joyful moments. And that's what we want to target with people with Alzheimer's.
Okay. And I imagine that in conversation, if a person's having a difficult time recollecting a particular event or a person's name, it's not very helpful to try to make a correction or...
Yeah, never correct anybody with Alzheimer's disease or any other type of dementia. If they've forgotten it, obviously, and all that's going to do is make them feel embarrassed and shamed.
Sure.
And we don't want to shame anybody. You can offer information instead of correcting them if they can't remember a name. Just push it into the conversation gently. And give them reminders and cues. And if they get your name wrong, still, so what?
Right.
With Alzheimer's, there's a lot of things we have to learn with our family members to say, so what? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. They may not recognize our face. Usually they'll still remember a voice. But if they know that person there cares about them, that's what's important.
That's essential.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
The department that you work for has several initiatives underway. I'd be interested in knowing some of those things that you're working on actively with your colleagues.
Okay. Well, one of them was actually a joint venture called Silver Alert. And this is a real important program that everybody needs to know about, whether you have any involvement with anyone with dementia or not. And this Silver Alert is like Amber Alert, but it's for anyone over the age of 18 who has any kind of intellectual impairment. So it could be somebody who's got an intellectual disability, who's younger, or it could be somebody with dementia or something else like that. And basically what happens is it's a alert system, so if somebody wanders off or disappears, they can get the word out. They'll get it on the electronic highway signs. It'll go out to local law enforcement, and then it'll go out statewide, and sometimes to surrounding states if we think that person might have gotten into a vehicle or something.
Okay.
It's been activated a few times since it started. It was passed into law in Mississippi on July 1st, 2010. So we've used the system a few times already around the state. Last spring, we had somebody with Alzheimer's disease in Hattiesburg, for example, who got in her car. She had about a half a tank of gas, and this was, I think, it was actually June. It was pretty hot out. Disappeared. They used they activated the Silver Alert system. They found her the next morning in Greenwood, Mississippi, and luckily she stayed somewhere cool and she was okay. But if we hadn't had that system in place, who knows? She might have been in Arkansas by the time they found her, if they found her. So that's an important initiative, and the work to make that happen was a joint effort of our Alzheimer's Division, the Alzheimer's Association of Mississippi, the Mississippi Nursing Association, and the Department of Public Safety. And the Department of Public Safety is the lead agency, obviously, because they're the ones who are out doing the alerts and going looking. But any one of these agencies will provide training if people want training on wandering and how to prevent wandering and keep people safe as well.
Okay.
The other initiative right now that's kind of important to us is, well, the Department of Mental Health as a whole has a whole suicide prevention campaign called Shatter the Silence. And you may have seen billboards around the state on highways about shattering the silence and calling. But what most people don't realize is that the most at-risk group for suicide is actually people over the age of 65. We typically think of teenagers as being at the highest risk. Now, out of 200 suicide attempts, typically 4 or 5 are successful with teenagers. With people over the age of 65, 1 out of 4 attempts is successful. So it's a much higher rate.
Wow.
It's about every 90 minutes somebody in America who's over age 65 commits suicide successfully. So it's pretty staggering. Now, people with Alzheimer's disease don't typically commit suicide, even though we hear a lot about people saying, oh, if I ever get Alzheimer's, I'm going to go off in a field and shoot myself. Well, that doesn't usually happen because by the time a person has Alzheimer's, they lose the ability the forethought to be able to carry out an action like that. But the caregivers who are under an incredible amount of stress are at an increased risk, particularly if it's a spouse caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease and they're older and they may have health issues of their own. But the burden can be so heavy, and if they don't have an adequate support system and resources in place, they're definitely at increased risk. So we're really targeting more caregivers with this campaign than anything. But and the warning signs are similar to other age groups, but some of those warning signs are different. You have people rushing to complete a will all of a sudden, or an elevated mood out of the blue. Those are symptoms that are a little bit different, or warning signs rather. So we just want to keep an eye on those folks, and it's important to have good support for folks who are providing care.
It's really important to be attuned to their needs and their stresses. Not only are they dealing with the practical demands of caring for another person, they're also working through their own issues of loss and grief. Even if that person they're caring for is still with us, they're processing through a lot of very intense emotions and demands.
It's one of those long goodbye situations. You watch that person that you love disappear before your eyes very slowly. So it's the constant grieving process, and I think caregivers as well, they not only, again, they have the practical demands of the disease, but they often are limited and more isolated themselves because of that disease and the care needs.
Sure.
And their support system suffers, and some of the things they may have wanted to do or envisioned for their future may be thwarted because of this disease as well, because they have these care responsibilities.
We'll be speaking more about suggestions, helpful tips, some of the things that we can do as caregivers to ease the burden just a little bit to maintain our good health. And we'll be back right after this. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. Thank you very much for staying with us. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. My name is Elise Spencer. We are joined this morning by Melora Jackson, who is the Training and Program Specialist for the southern half of Mississippi's Division of Alzheimer's Disease and Other Dementia under the Department of Health. We've been speaking about some of the presenting symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, some of the statistics related to this very tragic disorder. And we've been talking just a little bit about tactics for caregivers prior to the break. Some of the things that we talk about in terms of maintaining our own good health under any conditions are especially true for caregivers. It's important to maintain your nutritional intake and get an adequate amount of sleep. Those are things that are pretty difficult when you have a sick family member at home. I imagine social interaction really is very important as well for caregivers to maintain. Absolutely. It is essential. One of the risk factors or preventive factors that helps people with Alzheimer's disease to prevent Alzheimer's disease is actually perceiving that you have a good social support system. So, if you feel lonely, even if you have people around you, you're more at risk for Alzheimer's. For a caregiver who is isolated, taking care of somebody with this disease, they're increasing their own risk not only for Alzheimer's, but of course for
a myriad of other problems. So it's very important for the social interaction to be an important piece of a caregiver's life. Even if they feel guilty often about taking time for themselves or doing things for themselves, but it's absolutely essential. We hear a lot, it's almost a cliche now, but it's so true. When you're on the airplane, the flight attendants tell you to put that oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the person you're taking care of. It is so true. Caregivers have got to put that oxygen mask on themselves first in order to be able to care for that other individual. So they need to not feel guilty about taking time and doing some things for themselves, getting out in the community, and getting some kind of social interaction and getting some respite from that care responsibility if they want to help that person.
If a person doesn't have a large social circle or extended family to rely upon, there are other ways to share in their experiences. There are caregiver support groups and things of that nature.
Absolutely. Caregiver support groups are really important. I think there's some folks think that support groups mean that you're going to go and sit and you have to bare your soul and your emotions, and you don't. You can just go and sit and listen. A lot of times caregivers find just being able to commiserate about the things that their loved ones are doing is helpful, and they get some of the best tips for care as well, some ideas that sometimes us professionals don't always think of. But that's a very important piece. Now, support groups, sometimes it's hard to get to them, but there are more and more options for getting support through a support group, even if you can't get out of the house. If you're computer savvy, and more and more younger caregivers, of course, are than older ones tend to be. But there are online support groups. There's web groups, you can look into. Some great websites that are helpful. But there's also some toll-free support groups a person can call, national support groups, and they can call a toll-free number and just listen in or speak if they want to or not. And so there's all kinds of options now as well. Also, just, there's other resources in the community. It doesn't have to be a formal support group. If you don't have any friends or family around, just find something that you're interested in, that you've always wanted to learn about. Maybe go, if you're an older person yourself, go to a senior center. I've heard a lot of people say, well, that's for old people. Well, it's not so much for old people anymore. A lot of them have a lot of activities and things for younger folks. You go in there and it's like a rec center. There's all kinds of things. Just find something you're interested in and find a group of people that are doing it, whatever it may be. So any kind of social support is good.
So really just if you're interested in gardening, maybe join a garden club.
Sure, and you don't have to be good at it. Yeah, just do it. Just get out there and do something. And, support can come in the guise of all kinds of different things. So
okay, and don't be afraid to reach out and take accept the offers of help that you may receive from your fellow church members, your friends.
Absolutely. It's important that we learn to be gracious receivers as well as gracious gifters. So, and that's a challenge for caregivers, but in the end, it will help them. It will help them when they're caring for, and everybody will be better off for it.
Sure. Yes. Well, caregivers certainly do experience a spectrum related to loss and grief. Guilt probably is something also that caregivers struggle with from time to time, especially if someone becomes so ill that caring for them in the home doesn't remain a practical or safe alternative.
Yeah, we see that a lot. When a caregiver can no longer provide the level of care that person needs, they can't, either maybe they can't manage their behavior issues, or they may just have more physical care needs than that person's able to manage. And they often feel incredible guilt if they have to place them in some kind of long-term care. And they need to learn that, you're still a caregiver, even if a person goes to a nursing facility or an assisted living or whatever they may need. You can still participate in that person's care. If you go to the facility regularly where you've got your loved one placed, the squeaky wheel does get greased. They're going to get better care. Sure. And you can still have a connection with that individual. So caregiving doesn't stop because a person is placed. And people need to understand that it's okay. Even if that person said, no, never put me in a nursing home. Well, that person who may have said that didn't know what it was going to be like when they had Alzheimer's disease. Right. So you have to do what you have to do. It's not easy, and it's certainly a personal decision. But I think we need to really work on not feeling so guilty about it. And getting the support of others in making that decision can be helpful too.
So really caregiving just takes maybe a different format where you used to provide for a person's personal hygiene needs and help with showers and dressing and things like that. When a person would enter a long-term care situation, you have someone that would handle that, but your role as a caregiver doesn't end. It's important to still be an advocate for them, and to maintain a presence.
Right. It's good for the caregiver as well, because they know that they're doing what they can to help. You know, you have to look at long-term care facilities as another tool in the arsenal of caregiving. Not just, you know, it's not a substitute for caregiving. It's a tool in that toolbox. So, you know, whereas before something like incontinence supplies or a walker or you know, other special equipment might be a tool. Now using a facility as a tool, and it's okay.
Okay. For those that become quite severely ill, as I know through my work with Canon, occasionally we have individuals with a very advanced stage dementia and Alzheimer's who qualify for hospice care.
Yes.
And that's another component in that system.
That's a wonderful tool. If a person meets the criteria for hospice because of their Alzheimer's or their type of dementia, by all means use it. It's a wonderful service. There's so many things that can help both the individual with the disease and the caregiver. Definitely.
Very good.
Absolutely.
There are events in our community that are upcoming to bring about a heightened level of awareness and greater support for research and treatment of Alzheimer's and dementia-related disorders. One of those is the walk for Alzheimer's.
Yeah, the Alzheimer's Association has a memory walk every year, and they have them in different parts of the state. The one on the coast will be on November 12th, which is a Saturday. And if you want information about that, you can either go to their website, alz.org/ms, or you can just Google, you know, Alzheimer's Association Walk, and you'll get links. You can connect. You can call our office. We have the information as well. Or you can just, you know, watch the papers. It'll be in the papers and in the media soon about that as well. Other events that are coming up, well, we just had one. September 21st was Alzheimer's Action Day, or World Alzheimer's Day, and we had a Paint It Purple campaign going across the state, asking people to wear purple and just, you know, promote Alzheimer's awareness. In November is Alzheimer's Disease Month, actually. Okay. And so there's a lot of events around the state, and November 8th, I believe it's 18th, it's the third Tuesday of November, is National Memory Screening Day. So if you watch the media in your area, there will be different memory screening events. So if you are concerned about your own memory, or know somebody you think needs to be tested, you can get in touch with our office as well and find out where those screenings are going to be at. Or the Alzheimer's Foundation of America has a national list of places. So if you've got a loved one in another state that you want to have screened, they're going to be happening all over the country on that day. And so those are some events that are occurring in the near future.
Very important to take advantage of these community initiatives. Absolutely. To identify someone in early stage of illness, and as you said, to adopt strategies and medications if necessary to help a person maintain their functioning as long as possible.
Right.
Very good. There are events throughout our communities. There are caregivers conferences. There are all sorts of events, as we mentioned, support groups and such. There are also daycare programs that are available that can be an important source of support and information. The first step is just reaching out. So, Melora, before we go to break, if you would give us information about how to contact your office or any other source of information for caregivers.
Sure. You can call my office at 228-214-5556. You can go to our website, which is www.dmh.ms.gov, and under that there's a tab for different services, and you just click on the Alzheimer's disease tab. That'll take you to our website, and it's got information there. It's also got my contact information there. And you can go to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, and then from there you can click on the Mississippi tab. We tend to share information with the Alzheimer's Association in terms of resources, so you can go to either one of us, and we'll have connect you with whoever's appropriate for what you need.
Okay.
And there's also the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, which is there's two large national entities, and you can they're afafdn.org as well.
One more time on that.
I'm sorry, afafdn.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of sources of information within our community itself. Mm-hmm. There are sources of information online. All it takes is making a phone call or doing a search on your computer that can start you toward receiving information that can impact the lives of those you love and your ability as a caregiver. Mm. We are joined this morning by Melora Jackson, Training and Program Specialist for the southern half of Mississippi's Division of Alzheimer's Disease and Other Dementia under the Department of Health. Dementia and Alzheimer's is certainly a topic that we at Canon Hospice have a great deal of concern and empathy for. We serve patients and families who suffer from the end stages of this illness, and we know the long road and difficult road that they've experienced in the early and middle stages of the disease. Canon Hospice is available as a resource to individuals in the community that need information about end-of-life care, information about bereavement or caregiver stress. We want to be available to you. Our nurses are available 24 hours a day by telephone at 228-575-6251. Our office is located just north of Memorial Hospital in the Select Specialty Building on Broad Avenue. Come by for a visit. Call us if you need. We'd be happy to provide you with more information. We're really grateful to Mississippi Media Broadcasting for the opportunity to bring this show to you. And we'll be back with you after this short break for our conclusion. And we're back. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. My name is Elise Spencer. Prior to the break, we were speaking about some strategies for caregivers and ways to gather information that might help you in successfully addressing some of your demands as a caregiver. One of the things coming up in our area along the Gulf Coast is a caregiver conference, November 11th. And what information can you give us about that?
That is an all-day conference. It's free for caregivers. It is put on by the Alzheimer's Association of Mississippi, although I'll definitely be there and be a part of that,
Great.
Of course, as well as a lot of service providers, healthcare providers along the coast will be exhibiting there as well. So they're going to try to load people up with as many resources as possible, as well as information. That will be at the IP Casino Conference Center. You do need to register for that. So one can call the Alzheimer's Association. Again, you can go to their website. You can also, their phone numbers in the phone book, of course.
Okay.
Or you can call me. I'll have that information as well. My number again is 214-5556. So
Okay.
That's another good opportunity for caregivers.
Very good chance to get connected with other individuals that are
Yes.
experiencing caregiver stress and to get connected with a real spectrum of resources and information.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, November 11th at the IP Casino in Biloxi. It's the Caregivers Conference. Free for caregivers, and is it also available for clinicians in the community?
Yes, absolutely. They certainly can come as well. You don't have to be a caregiver. You could be just somebody who wants to learn more. You can be a service provider, whatever. They just need to make sure they have an accurate count so they have enough materials for everyone.
Sure.
So they ask for RSVPs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We've also touched a little bit on healthful practices that help us maintain our brain health, but there are some other things that we can do to engage our brains. What are those things?
Absolutely. One of them, of course, is doing puzzles, word puzzles, math puzzles. I'm going to butcher the word, but Sudoku. I can never say it, but that is a great one for your brain.
Okay.
Great one for your brain if you can do those. I'm not very good at them, but I keep trying. But any kind of learning is helpful. In the 1980s, those of you who remember, they used to have a public service announcement series called Never Stop Learning. Well, that is so very true when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. You never want to stop learning. Do something to engage your brain. Sudoku, that's it. Sudoku. I knew I could say it. Anyway, So you want to do some kind of activity. Now, it could be reading. It could be, even if you're a game show addict, even things like Wheel of Fortune, trying to guess the puzzles, or, Jeopardy is great, of course. But, anything to engage your brain,
So just as we exercise our bodies, it's so important to challenge ourselves mentally.
Absolutely. Okay. And then you can also, I think, 20 minutes a day of quiet time. I call it chill out time for your brain. And it can be different things. You could sit and listen to music. You might want to sit outside and just listen to nature. You may want 20 minutes of prayer time, if that works for you, or just meditation, whatever. Just some quiet time to yourself, about 20 minutes a day. Kind of help reboot yourself. That's good for all of us for a lot of reasons, of course, as are all these things. But that really does seem to help improve our functioning and increase our resistance. Another thing that actually is really helpful is ballroom dancing.
Really?
There's been a lot of research on that. This shows that ballroom dancing, the way our brain has to work to choreograph the movements, it's really good. Now, square dancing is a close second. Anything that has choreographed moves tends to be better. Ballroom dancing is number one. So, but all kinds of dancing are going to be good because it's good exercise. Gets the blood flowing. Of course, except I discourage break dancing because spinning on your head cannot be good for you as far as Alzheimer's. But if you're really adept at it, maybe, I don't know. But
engage your brain, but protect it at the same time.
Absolutely. Wear your helmets, definitely, and take care of your brain. So those are some things that are helpful as well.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. We were speaking during a break about contact sports and prior brain injury. Are there things that we've done in our adolescence or young adulthood that would cause a seemingly innocuous brain injury? How does that affect our likelihood of getting?
It does put you at increased risk. Now, the NFL is putting a lot of money into Alzheimer's disease research because they have a disproportionate number of retired players that are coming down with Alzheimer's disease, more so than the population in general, because of previous head injuries. It can also, brain injuries, of course, can cause other problems as well, but and it doesn't have to be sports. But there's the big campaign about if a person gets hit in the head playing football or whatever, take them off the field, don't play with a concussion, all that good stuff. Well, that's so very true. I know that when I was a kid, I was very clumsy. I fell out of the top bunk. I fell off the side of the slides. As a kid, I've had several concussions, and I'm sure I'm at increased risk for that. But you definitely want to try to minimize brain injuries. Now, that, again, like any of these risk factors, it doesn't mean that's your destiny to get Alzheimer's, but it does increase your risk. So you want to try to take care of your head, protect it, definitely.
If you're riding a bicycle, make sure you've got a helmet on and things like that. Okay. Okay. We reach for all sorts of therapies and alternative treatments and things to hopefully help us get a better handle on our medical conditions. Are herbal remedies and things of that nature helpful in terms of maintaining our brain health?
Not really. There was a big craze a few years ago about ginkgo biloba being great for your brain and improving your cognitive function. Well, studies really haven't found any conclusive evidence that that's true. Anytime you take an herbal remedy that is not FDA approved, you're gambling because we don't know what the side effects may be. But there isn't really anything like that has been proven helpful. So take that stuff with a grain of salt. The only thing that I would say is if you're choosing a pain reliever, choose what they call an NSAID, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, assuming that you don't have other health issues that prohibit you from that. Ibuprofen or naproxen or something like that. Don't take it as a regular vitamin, but if you have to take a pain reliever, if you choose one of those seem to have some protective qualities that may be helpful in prevention as well. But you certainly don't want to take it unless you need it anyway, because you're going to cause more liver problems. That's more likely if you take too much of that kind of stuff. Okay.
Always the most important source of information is your personal physician.
Absolutely.
Who can guide your decisions about that.
Absolutely. Talk to your healthcare providers before you don't make any of these decisions on your own.
Okay. It's important to even mention the herbal remedies or things that you may be contemplating so that they can properly advise you of their effects. Okay. Well, is there a cure for dementia and Alzheimer's?
Well, like I said at the beginning, there's different types of dementia, and so different diseases can cause dementia. Most are not. Alzheimer's disease is a fatal illness, and there is no cure for it.
Okay.
Some types of dementia are reversible. Depending on the head injury, sometimes it could could cause a dementia that is actually reversible. Usually not, but sometimes. Some things like normal pressure hydrocephalus, with a shunt can drain fluid and it can reverse dementia. Some strokes cause dementias that can be, with some therapy, that person can regain their abilities. And there's a few other kind of situations like that where we can reverse the dementia. But very few types are actually curable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for those of us hoping that within our lifetimes they will discover some gene or some trigger that causes this illness, there certain researchers are certainly exploring it.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of area of research on, of course, finding a cure. I would love to be put out of a job because they found a cure. I can do something else. But in the meantime, of course, we're doing the best we can to care for people. But research is also looking at things like delaying the onset of symptoms. So if somebody's, got it in their genes and destined to get it, maybe they won't get it till 10 years later. They might, because it's age-related. If they would have gotten it at 75, it may not occur till 85 and not go that far. Or maybe they would pass away from something else before the symptoms even start. And then, of course, prevention research is going on, research on how to better care for folks, therapeutic techniques, how to help people improve their functioning or maintain their functioning longer. Lots and lots of research going on. And it is promising. A couple of different studies that have been in the news lately in the last week or so. A nasal spray of insulin that seems to be helpful,
really?
Improving cognitive function. It doesn't work the same way as injected insulin. So this isn't necessarily for someone who has. If you have diabetes or not, it doesn't really matter. It's got to be in the nasal form, and it goes directly into the brain, and it actually helps with improving function. And these studies were done with people who had mild cognitive impairment or early stage Alzheimer's disease, and it did show some improvement in symptomology. Now, again, it's not a cure, but it does seem to help.
And that's just an initial finding. They're going to follow that up with more.
Absolutely,
more
it takes
studies.
a lot of studies. Any one of these things, it's going to take years to find out if it's number one, if it's a safe treatment. Number two, if it's really effective.
Okay.
So it's a very slow process. Research is a slow process. So finding a cure or finding something that's going to reverse the symptoms, it's going to take a long time.
Okay.
So, you see things in the paper every week about it that sound really hopeful, but the reality is it takes a long time. So don't get swept away with false hope. Do hope. Someday we will find a cure for this disease, but in the meantime, those things tend to get a little bit exaggerated in the media. They're exciting, and they are things that we need, that we have hope for, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
It's an encouraging sign, but we still need to more fully
we need to work
explore
with what's going on now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are many ways that we can try to preserve our own good health and help those who are afflicted with this illness. Lots of preventative strategies, lots of coping strategies, a whole host of organizations and resources that are there and available, ready to help. There's no cures yet, but we are hopeful, and we are attuned to developments that help us uncover the mystery of dementia and Alzheimer's. We are so fortunate to have Melora Jackson in the studio with us this morning to help us explore this topic of dementia and Alzheimer's. It's a difficult topic to discuss. It's a difficult one to understand. And yet so many in our community are touched by this illness, either suffering from it personally or helping to care for someone who has been ill. It's an important topic to explore with your doctor. Certainly there are many things that may suggest that someone's suffering from some early symptoms, but it takes a visit to the doctor to know what the next step might be, and if in fact that is an appropriate diagnosis.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we encourage you to reach out to your personal physician, get more information, and don't delay. The most promising course is to identify it early and adopt strategies, medications, and therapies that will help a person live as fully as possible for as long as possible.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're glad that you've joined us too. This is the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. This is a community service program that we make available through Mississippi Media Broadcasting in order to bring you information about healthcare topics that may be of concern to you or those that you know, your friends and neighbors. Remember to check on your friends and neighbors. Even though the summer heat has abated, it's so important for us to reach out and take care of one another. It's a critical component in your healthcare maintenance. Makes you feel good, makes them feel good. Just remember to check on those that you love. We're so grateful for the opportunity to be with you this morning. My name is Elise Spencer. I am the host of the Canon Hospice Radio Hour. Canon can be reached at 228-575-6251. Please join us again for our next episode.